This is the view from high up, on top of St Nicholas's Cathedral's roof in Newcastle upon Tyne. In September of 2013, a 4-day event took place here, where many of Tyneside's places of heritage were opened up to the public, as a free gesture to celebrate some of the historical and past achievements of this great region. We saw many areas opened up, such as the region's railway past at the Stevenson Railway Museum, a place that celebrates the world's railway when it was in its infancy, here in the northeast of England. We also visited some of the region's medical laboratories, here at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital's Path Labs, and also visited some still standing and still functioning old churches here in Newcastle. Now, being born and growing up in Newcastle doesn't guarantee that you'll know everything about your home city's past, and so it proved when I visited an attraction that's literally beneath our feet here, and which was a total unknown to me. I visited Newcastle's Victoria Tunnel here at Ousbourne Village. The Victoria Tunnel was built in the 1830s to carry coal from the Spittletongues colliery to the Staithes at the River Tyne, where the coal was exported principally to London. After the mine closed in 1860, it fell into dereliction and wasn't used again until the outbreak of World War II, where it was used as part of the city's air raid shelter network, and it protected around 9,000 people. After the war, it was closed again until the Ousbourne Trust took it over and opened it up to the public. A group of 14 met outside the Ousbourne Village's farm, and the tour of the Ousbourne Waterway and Tunnel started here. Liz Cowans, a knowledgeable volunteer guide, led us and conducted the information-led tour, which filled us in about how the area impacted on the local industry, how it fell into dereliction by the mid-20th century, and how it's been regenerated as the whole quayside area of Newcastle has, as the times have moved on into the 21st century. We heard about how the factories in the area made paint, used for some of the ships that were also made locally just down here at the River Tyne.
Paint the ships that they made out on the river. British Paints at the top would have the paint as the lead as a powder.
We can see that sailing vessels are still very much part of this area. A factory here made cloth for the sails, just at the edge of the river. This is the entrance to Victoria Tunnel. It's the most recently built entrance, built around the start of the Second World War, and is one of 6 entrances here in the city. This one is closest to the mouth of the Tyne. As we stood at the entrance, we were all given a torch and received a health and safety introduction about the importance of keeping our hats on and sticking together in the group.
It's too late, I've seen you can't go on that line.
So we donned our protective hats, and to the sound of an air raid warning siren, we went inside.
This was one of the entrances built during the Second World War.
The first part of the tunnel we visited was well lit, with a row of lighting, and we were told about its use from 1939.
So, you're actually standing in 1939, aren't you? That's where you're standing because this was built for the Second World War. If I jump, lurch, into this bit here, I'm going right back 100 years. I'm going back to 1839. I'm going back to 1836 when they actually built this tunnel. And it was built to transport coal.
Here we walked past the benches that people sat on for hours, all throughout the war.
Imagining that you're in the Second World War. Imagining that you're in the Second World War.
And you sat here for the tourists in the area.
Well, no. That's it, isn't it? So we've got the Germans coming across. So you're in here. You're actually not deep enough. You wouldn't have sat here, because if a bomb had dropped, you were toast. You need at least 50 feet to be safe. So these were brought in for How We Won the War. It was a BBC Two programme.
Liz then talked about how the Victoria Tunnel was named after the young Queen and first opened for the transport of coal from Spittletongue's colliery to the ships on the River Tyne from 1842.
And it became a wire, because once it actually snapped and all the wagons went down and shot over in quite a graceful arch actually. They sort of arch out the end and splat straight on the boat that was waiting for them. And at low tide, everybody had to go out and pick the coal up.
These blast walls were built into the tunnel in the 1940s to save as many people as possible in the event of a direct hit from a German bomber. Lighting to the tunnel was fitted during the war, but at the sides of the tunnel so tall people didn't hit the head on the bulbs, though apparently it didn't stop people from pinching some of the bulbs. Strengthening to the tunnel was added in the 1950s by adding more concrete to the tunnel walls to strengthen it due to the building of flats above, which had started to loosen boulders that threatened to crush the tunnel. Areas can be seen where mineral-filled water has left stalactites forming down the walls.
Bricks and in the mortar, because it's white, it's bringing it through with the cement, and that's all coming through as well. So these are stalactites. The university comes down to actually look at them because they are unique. They've never. Oh, there it goes again. Yeah. They've never actually.
How the tunnel was actually built was described from mining records of the time.
Tell me about the ceiling here. Does it look like there's been a join or something? Yeah. Is it the same height?
No.
Is it different? Yep. Do you remember what I said about the way they think? You're right there. The way they think they actually constructed the tunnel was they would dig a hole down along a line prescribed by the engineers, and they would dig down and they would know how far to dig down, and then they would dig out in different lines, and those lines should meet up with people further along. After that, they would then put the arch in, and then at the very end they would have one of these areas which they dug down to fill in and join up. So you do see along the tunnel, they think that this area here was where they had the original shaft built through the clay, and this was built in when the other two sections had been finished. They were very, very good at what they did.
On the sides of the blast walls we can see the locations of where we're actually standing presently beneath the city, which can be as deep as 85 feet underground. The atmospheric conditions down here vary very little all through the year. The temperature stays between 8 to 12 degrees C. Although being in the tunnel without torches would be eerily dark, it was reassuring not to be on your own or in the dark. But for past workers or the homeless, or for bomb sheltering souls during the war, that's exactly how it may have been at times for them. We met up with an essential requirement that was introduced during the war. The guide informed us about the penalties for spending a penny in any part of the tunnel except in this provided tool.
Right. The only thing that is that if you weed in one of the channels at the side, you would lose a week's wages because somebody would dob on you.
The tunnel tour was fascinating and something I'd recommend we all do if we want to sample a piece of live and still functioning local history. Liz, the tour guide, was a knowledgeable lady who was totally engaging in her storytelling
and it's...
The entire group found it just as enthralling as I did. As we headed back towards ground, we thought the entertainment was over, but it wasn't. The Osborne Trust has provided some actors from Time Bandits, who gave us a show about 1940s life here in Newcastle.
Who's talk of slaves? And she's not so dumb as she looks. I'm going to have the Northern Command Home Guard, and I'm...
Yes, which one?
The group of visitors were clearly engaged by this final act, and it rounded off a really interesting activity of sampling the Victoria Tunnel. Clive Goodwin from the Osborne Trust did everything I asked of him to let me fully sample their heritage activity. I asked the acting people, John and Sylvie, to tell me a little bit more about wartime life around here, and they duly obliged.
Good afternoon. As I hope you know, in 1940, Britain faced its greatest trial. Industrial Tyneside was, of course, a target for the Bosch bombers. The German Luftwaffe had a huge fleet of medium bombers. Happily for us, happily for Britain, they didn't have a strategic bomber command. That would come later in the war, and that would be our bombers, not theirs. Their planes, Heikler's Dorniers Ju-88, were twin-engine medium-range bombers, deadly enough, of course. Losses.
Tell you what, it's not that bad down here.
You think it's not that bad?
You get used to it. You come down here almost every night. It's all right. You know the people, have a good time, have a chat, sing songs, and then you know this is also a shortcut into town. People just walk all the way to town, go to pictures. Go
Before I
to
left,
and then
I
they
found
come
the centre manager, Clive Goodwin, and got a few of his thoughts.
The tunnel itself was built in 1830s, opened in 1842 to bring coal from a pit at Spittal Tongues, 2.5 miles across west of Newcastle. It brought the coal down purely by gravity in huge wagons, each holding about 2.5 ton of coal. The coal was then brought to the River Tyne and shipped off mainly to London for export. In around about 1860, the quality of the coal wasn't quite good enough for power stations, and the pit basically sold up. It couldn't continue with such poor quality coal. The tunnel closed, laid redundant for the best part of 100 years until World War II broke out. The City Council in 1939 were looking for somewhere for up to 9,000 people a night to shelter during bombing raids. This place was already made. All the city had to do in 1939 is to build this entrance, which goes 100 yards down to the tunnel itself, which stretches out towards. In addition to this entrance, they built 6 other entrances in the city, desperate to get inside away from the bombing raids. And so basically for 5 or 6 or 7 hours every night during the 6-year period, 39 to 1945, people came here and sheltered. They had very basic beds and benches to sit or sleep on. But it was a very, very successful area shelter. At the same time it was very damp, really bad conditions, but it was so safe because you're so far underground in parts of this. Some of the tunnel are 85 foot below the ground, so there's no bombs going to get that deep, so it was very safe. In fact, nobody died here during the making of the tunnel in the 1830s, 40s. Nobody died here during the Second World War. The Osborne Trust, as I said, took over in 2010 to operate this remarkable piece of engineering, are here basically to bring the attention of the Newcastle and wider public's awareness of this little bit of heritage. We do call it Newcastle's hidden heritage.
I found this exploration of living history absolutely enthralling, and I would recommend it to anyone looking to see a superb example of a genuine World War II piece of history. The tours happen twice daily and cost just £6 for adults and £4 for children. For that, you get a tour of the Ousburn historical area as well as the Victoria Tunnel. In my opinion, really worth visiting.